Hello again everyone. Today I want to discuss Polytopia's Oumaji tribe and their strengths and weaknesses. Oumaji is a tribe that sits and has sat for quite some time now firmly in the lower tier category of tribes, and that's rather a shame considering how unique the tribe is. Oumaji are designed to be a tribe that are initially based on desert nomads, and as such they start the game with the riding tech, which is all well and good. The late game aesthetic borrows more from ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia, with vast farmlands providing population for huge cities. However, it's in this economic development that the problem lies. The fundamental idea of Polytopia is that in the early game you should focus on your economy with very few exceptions. However, Oumaji contradict this same goal directly as they begin the game with the riding tech, which, to quote the wiki, is not an economic tech and does not lead to one. Now you might protest that free spirits is an economic tech because it allows the chopping of trees for stars. Unfortunately for an aspiring Oumaji player, the tribe has 0.2 times multiplier on its forest spawn, which in layman's terms means you won't even have enough forest to make free spirit viable in most spawns. And as if Oumaji didn't already have enough nails in their coffin, capturing cities in Polytopia leads to a rise in tech prices that can prohibit you from accessing your main economic tech, which is farming early on. In order to get a head start on farming, therefore, I strongly suggest that you research organisation on turn 0 in order to give you the necessary stars to get a level 2 capital on turn 2, at which point your rider should have captured a second city. You will then need to diverge in terms of strategy based on the specific set of spawning circumstances you have, potentially using your economic development and 4 or 5 stars to upgrade your second city and take a workshop for development. If you cannot use fruit to upgrade your second city, it is possible that you can simply get by saving stars for farming, bearing in mind that you will likely keep an economic handicap for the rest of the early game. However, once you have farming, things are looking up for you to some extent. At this point your rider and any warrior you've built to explore and defend your empire should have taken around 3 cities in total, and it is probable that at least one of these can be upgraded with a farm. Be careful though, farms give 2 population apiece, meaning you may run the risk of spending 5 stars on a farm without actually fully upgrading a city, or wasting stars where you could use fruit to upgrade for a lower price. After this phase of the game passes, the Oumaji player's next priority is to switch tack to researching over 3 spiritual roads, with roads being the priority if you have more room to expand than free spirit otherwise. With the roads tech, you should be able to make do for quite some time in terms of military just with the use of riders and roads to deal with intruders, although the free spirit routes give you different options, including either to chop down trees and immediately head for chivalry, or wait until you get chivalry and then burn forests in order to build a better economy. The latter strategy combines well with construction, which you would do well to research anyhow. You will, however, often be forced into situations which require you to go for the short-term strategy by the other tribes, so be prepared to chop down enough trees to research chivalry and then get 10 more stars for the first night. And while we're on the subject, knights are basically the middle game as far as Oumaji are concerned, with the obvious exception of a few situations. For example, you could choose to focus on the navy if there's no better option due to being stranded on an island, or research shields on defense. These island spawns are, of course, usually a death sentence for Oumaji and are all too common, given that Oumaji's decreased water spawn in the game code is not actually translated into the spawns of the game itself. When facing off against another tribe, there is usually no better option than knights for almost any tribe if you are careful to make the longest possible attack chains and promote after you finish your last attack. And Oumaji have a natural route into the strategy because they start the game with a tech that leads to chivalry later on. In regards to other tech branches, the picture somehow gets worse. Hunting is almost useless on home turf, again due to the spawn rates. Climbing and its associated techs are the same, although mining is not completely useless on Oumaji because they only have a 0.5 times multiplier for mountains. And fishing and sailing are not useless per se, but have no real synergy with Oumaji whatsoever, with the high cost and low health of riders. For this reason, I can't really endorse using any of them, unless you like to mess around with my benders as Oumaji like me. Well, that's the full picture, a simple tribe that is killed by core mechanics and never really gets off the ground, occupying a strange no-man's land between aggression and development of economy, not really satisfying the demands of either and ending up falling flat on its face. It's frustrating really. There's no real reason Oumaji should be bad in a vacuum, but in the context of a game with 1 or 2 dominant strategies that they can't fulfill, I think as far as Oumaji is concerned, a buff in spawn rate is in order, perhaps in terms of fruit or crop spawn rate, and a water reduction could allow their land-based playstyle to flourish. Before we end this video then, Matchups. Oumaji are really at their best when they are given space to expand until the middle game because of how soft the rider is, so matches against Fenrir and Illyrion are best done on larger maps. That said, Oumaji are a surprisingly satisfactory counter to Hudrik and Polaris because of their hit-and-run riders being able to take advantage of the weaker enemy units that lack the close-range retaliation ability of the warrior, the Mooney and the archer respectively. Well, perhaps Oumaji have a niche use case after all then. Bear this in mind if you're ever in a 1v1 with me, perhaps, since I play Polaris a good 50% of the time in multiplayer. The opposite, of course, applies to tribes such as Quetzali and any T0 tribe who will realistically be able to best Oumaji most of the time, assuming equal skill. So then, I suppose now, it is also worth discussing Luxador separately, because Luxador are a tribe that really, I think, outclass Oumaji in almost every way, and it's sad because I like to think that every tribe is viable within its uncertain situation. But Luxador having that extra star per turn, because they start the game with an upgraded capital, for those who are unaware, allows them to simply research riding on turn 0, and by turn 1 they'll already have a rider, and or be progressing towards free spirit, which allows them to chop down their abundance of trees, and Luxador just have better resources, they have a better economy, they can get riding just as fast if not faster, and they're flexible because they don't have to commit to a riding based strategy either. So if you're a free to play, then sure, you should focus on playing Oumaji perhaps and develop your skills with them. But to be honest, if you're free to play, you already have access to Bardo, which is arguably the best tribe in the game, perhaps there's a debate between that and Simanti and Kiku. And you have access to Imperius, which is just solid, reliable, all-rounder, and you can't get caught off guard early on because you're able to level up your capital and then build extra units if you want. And then you have access to Jinji, who are just, well, to be quite frank, they're just more fun because in terms of the exploring element, you can find villages more consistently. You have the mines and the forges, and you can go for smithery, you can go for the normal tactic with knights, you can go for riders. You can build up an economy and an empire and connect it all up with roads. You can build mines, forges, and so on and so forth. My point is that Jinji, Imperia, Sparta are all just far more versatile and cram you into a corner far less than with Oumaji, who really have one dominant strategy unless you want to meme around, which is roads, riders, free spirit, knights, farming, and effectively neglect the other half of the tech tree. So that is all I have to say about Oumaji and their matchups with other tribes. It's probably worth noting that there are decent counters to Polaris and Simanti, but I can't even think of a situation in which you'll know your opponent is playing one of those tribes for certain. And if they aren't playing one of those tribes for certain, then where are you? You're almost completely screwed at that. So then, I suppose that my conclusion to all of this is that Oumaji are rather lackluster, and you would really be better off with a T0, Illyrion for the movement, or even Luxador, who I consider to be an upgrade in spite of their nerf. But if you're an Oumaji player, you have my blessing, and that is all I have to say for you in terms of tips. Until the next one, goodbye.